We, the people of Montana, grateful to God for the quiet beauty of our state, the grandeur of our mountains, the vastness of our rolling plains, and desiring to improve the quality of life, equality of opportunity, and to secure the blessings of liberty for this and future generations, do ordain and establish this Constitution. So begins Montana's Constitution, adopted and ratified 40 years ago. We gather here in the state's capital city to reflect on the meaning, the impact, the legacy of that foundational document. We also meet to celebrate the hard work and the civic commitment of the delegates to that constitutional convention. And can we just take a moment to applaud the delegates who are here? It really is very moving to see you all. I'm Ken Egan, Executive Director of Humanities Montana, and several of you have been kind enough to thank me for helping to put this together, but truthfully, we've had a lot of help. I'm going to simply say that we have a program, and I hope you found the program in your folders, and the program lists the many partners and sponsors, and please do pay attention to them as well. So before I provide an overview of the 2 days we're going to spend together, I do want to just visit with you about what's in the folder. My staff and I want to also highlight my wonderful staff, Kim Anderson, Sam Dwyer, Ken Stoltz. They're doing a lot of good hard work. As you open your folder, you're going to find that there is a conversation etiquette. And I hope we'll take this seriously. But I just want to read briefly from a statement by Thomas E. Mann, a very well-known political scientist. So this is the conversation etiquette for our time together. Democracy is a means of living together despite our differences. Democratic deliberation is an alternative to physical violence. It is predicated on the assumption that it's possible to disagree agreeably, that it's better to laugh than cry, that one can vigorously contest the positions of one's adversary without questioning his or her personal integrity or motivation, and that parties to a debate are entitled to the presumption that their views are legitimate, if not correct. And I know we'll proceed in that spirit for the next day and a half. Now, what else will you find in the folders? You'll find the U.S. and Montana constitutions. We wanted to be sure you have those in your hands because, in fact, several of the panelists will refer directly to the constitutions. And after all, if we accomplish nothing else over the next day and a half, I hope we all read those constitutions cover to cover and give them a great deal of thought. Finally, you will find in your folders an evaluation form. Very, very helpful to us as we go forward if you would take some time to evaluate your experience at We the People. And please leave the evaluation form with either myself or members of my staff. And again, you can recognize our staff through our very nice little name tags here. So, by the way, if you decide that you are not going to make use of these materials after you leave today, would you do us a favor and leave the folder with one of us, and we'll recycle those materials. So what's going to take place over the next day and a half? Why are we here together? What will happen, in fact, is that citizens from diverse backgrounds will come together to discuss crucial issues raised by both the Montana and U.S. constitutions. What are citizens' rights? What are the rights and responsibilities of Native peoples? What do these constitutions say about our relationship with the environment? What is the relationship between local governments and state and federal governments? And what is state sovereignty according to these documents? And then this evening we're going to have a special keynote conversation, very much looking forward to it, in which Brian Kahn and Carl Graham will focus on the question of free enterprise and, quote unquote, what were the founders thinking? So that'll be lively. All of these conversations will culminate in a summing up session that will take place tomorrow afternoon here at 3 o'clock. It's going to be guided by Bob Brown and Pat Williams. It'll be an opportunity for everyone to jump in, share final thoughts, sum up what they've discovered, raise lingering questions. So I think that's a really critical moment, and I hope and trust all of us can come back together at 3 tomorrow. So how can you participate? Well, the way we've organized the conversations is that the first 45 minutes will consist of the panelists talking among themselves. The next 30 minutes are all about your responses to what they said or your opportunity to share insights, thoughts, your questions. We want this to be very interactive. And to a person, the conversationalists, the panelists have said they want to proceed that way. They want this very much to be about give and take. So please jump into the conversation. Now, I just want to note 3 kind of additional events that are happening in relationship to, kind of alongside the conversations. The first occurs tonight at the Montana Historical Society, which is just across the street from the Capitol. Starting at 5 o'clock, we'll have a reception hosted by the Historical Society. It's going to be an informal gathering, but you'll be able to see the Montana constitutions displayed on the second floor of the Historical Society. I think that's a remarkable opportunity. So please join us down there. That's going to be a lot of fun. Tomorrow at noon, we have a special luncheon in honor of the delegates. And we've invited the delegates to join us. And I hope many of you can be there with us. This is the only paid event for the non-delegates. It's $20 charge. It'll take place right next door here, so you can just come in at noon tomorrow. Chuck Johnson, we all know Chuck Johnson. He'll be our keynote speaker, so it's going to be a terrific event. And then tomorrow evening, back here in this very room at 5 o'clock, we're going to honor Montana Humanities Heroes. Special thanks to Carroll College because they are really hosting that event. But we're recognizing 9 extraordinary Montanans, and I hope you can be here with us. It's a great occasion. So, to get us started, I want to introduce Attorney General Steve Bullock. Steve is Montana's 20th Attorney General. He began his career in public service in 1996 as Chief Legal Counsel to the Montana Secretary of State. Please join me in welcoming Steve Bullock.
Thanks, Ken, and it's truly a pleasure to be here this afternoon to get to kick off the conversations that you'll be having over the next day. In doing so, also, I very much appreciate and think we should take heed of some of the words that Ken said in his introductory comments. Because while you gather to discuss the state and federal constitutions, their interplay, their conflicts, we also gather at a time when there are profound differences of opinion and frustration about these documents, or at least the legislative and judicial interpretations of them. Those differences, both at the federal and the state level, they may call into question the very underpinnings of the documents. It's no exaggeration to say that we're at a crossroads in our democracy and in our Republican form of government. Depending on how one views it, we're either at the point of losing confidence in the Constitution or the documents or a full-on constitutional crisis. And we need to ask ourselves, is that crisis based on the documents themselves or the words we use, the conversation, the way we deploy words in discussing those documents? Through conversation, can we get to the point where, while we may not all agree, but at least the fundamental underpinnings of our state and our federal governments and the interplay between them remain sound? I'd submit that we can, as we have conversation, we can learn from one another about the documents. And if we're willing to listen as we are to speak, we can draw lessons not just about the documents, but how they were created. Any practicing lawyer or law student has a story about when they were first made aware of and drawn into the marvels of the Montana Constitution. For me, it was my first semester, second year, University of Montana Law School. It was a seminar class taught by Professor Larry Ellison. I still remember it like it was yesterday. It was the first day of class, and typically what happens at the first day of class, you're given your syllabus, some sort of outline of where you'll be going with that class. But Professor Ellison showed up for each of us with a big honking box. And he gave every student all the transcripts, all the minutes from the bound set from the Constitutional Convention. And the first reaction I had was probably like so many people in the class. It's like, well, maybe someday when I'm a real lawyer, this will look good on my bookshelves. Or do I really have to carry these around? But he gave us more than a set of books. What Professor Elison had given, if we were wise enough to figure it out, if we were willing to crack the spines of those books, he was giving us a set of keys. A key to unlocking all the wonders in that brief little document that has helped shape and define what the Montana we are and what we're still becoming from the early 1970s. And as we went through the semester, and he made us read parts, not of the Constitution, but of the comments and of the minutes, I, like so many others in the class, realized what an accomplishment, what an amazing experience it must have been to be one of the 100, sitting in those committees, drafting the words that we as lawyers, legislators, and others now regularly parse on a daily basis. The genius of our Constitutional Convention may have been initially grounded in chance. During the legislative session authorizing the convention, the Montana Supreme Court held that because legislators were already elected to an office that extended beyond the delegate terms, they were ineligible to become candidates in the delegate election. As Leo Graybill, who was elected the chairman of the convention, explained, the delegates brought none of the acrimony and bitterness to the convention that often develops between seasoned politicians with preconceived positions on major state issues. Instead, the delegates usually approached the principal issues before the convention in an objective manner, and they sought to avoid most of the pressures to which legislators are generally subjected. Lobbyists were generally unwelcome. Although probably unforeseen, the result of the Supreme Court's action was the constitutional body relatively free from influence and dedicated to basic changes to Montana's constitutional framework. And even if that launch of what it became was, when the body gathered, was unforeseen, when the actual body, when the 100 delegates came together, the actions they took were not only deliberative, but indeed courageously thoughtful. Though almost all of the delegates had run to get that seat with a party affiliation, they agreed early on that you wouldn't even use party words, party labels. There would be no discussion of political parties throughout the convention. They chose to sit alphabetically, not by interest or faction, but alphabetically so that each person would sit down, again, not as a member of a political party or as part of the rural-urban divide, but as a Montanan, earnestly doing their best to create something a lot larger than themselves and for their children and grandchildren. And of course, the genius of it all also went far beyond seating charts. Borrowing from Emily Dickinson, a college professor of mine that had written an anthology of ideology, an American ideology, he said, to dwell in possibility is the ambiguous gift bestowed upon America. To dwell in possibility is the ambiguous gift bestowed upon America. And as you go through the Constitutional Convention proceedings, one quickly recognizes that those delegates got it. They knew that they were tasked with the ambiguous gift of dwelling in the possibility, living with the understanding that even though we were 85 years at the time into statehood, our future wasn't scripted, that their choices and actions could deliver our state in any multitude of different directions. And it was a task that they took to heart.